We are Aspen Working Class Issues. My name is Lee Mulcahy, and this is...
I'm Shawn Cox, and we're here to interview Jeffrey Evans, who is running for County Commissioner. And Jeffrey's
Pitkin County.
Okay. The first thing I would like to talk about is cancel culture. 40% of the population thinks it's become a problem, and about 25% of the population thinks it's a good thing. And, you know, cancel culture is an issue that make people believe something is bad or want to give the concept of something being bad or someone being bad and negating their opinions and thoughts and feelings. And
What are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, I'm surprised you could find 40% of the public that felt comfortable in knowing what it is, for starters. It's a pretty broad description these days. I find it very scary. I'm old school, in terms of definitions, I'm kind of old school liberal in that the cornerstone of liberalism is free speech.
Amen.
So I'm having a little trouble getting oriented to the whole idea that liberalism now is about shutting down speech which you think is evil or bad or whatever. I've always believed the solution to speech is more speech.
Amen.
So I guess that may be a generational issue. I'm still curious about that. I don't know if that's the case or not. But let's call it what it is. It's a shadow justice system. You know, we've spent hundreds of years deciding which things are legal and which things are not based on an idea of criminality. And now we have a situation where you can be damaged to a much greater extent than you ever could in a court of law because you've got the wrong idea according to a certain group of people. And that is so scary, I don't even know how to describe it. Because we don't have the same cultural agreement over centuries over what should qualify to be punished. We don't have courts of law. We don't have introduction of evidence. We don't have any of the things that would normally go into a process where you decide to fine someone or deprive them of their liberty or take their job away from them. So it's just freewheeling whatever pressure you can put on some financial institution to make them do your bidding or suffer the consequences through economic harm. It's got to be reined in. I don't care what side of which question you're on. It's got to be reined in. It's
well, 62% of Americans feel that it's a problem. 55% of Democrats.
Now, when you're quoting, who surveys?
Politico.
Politico?
Yes,
okay. I was curious. I'm always curious where these numbers come from.
Exactly.
Where did that come from? Yeah.
52% of Democrats are afraid to say what they think. 59% of independents are afraid to say what they think, and 79% of Republicans are afraid to say what they think. So do you think there's a way to turn this around?
Well, I'd tell you, but I'm afraid to. And turning it around, I mean, boy, oh boy, social issues, the word inertia comes from physics. But boy, it affects social situations to a very great extent. Once you get momentum behind something like what is happening, it is so hard to turn it off. And really the only way you can ever turn it off is if a majority of people stop being scared of it and just ignore it. Just refuse to play. My mother had a great saying that I've borrowed throughout my life. When something would be going on like this, her statement always was, "I'm not about to play their silly games." Remember that one. It comes in handy in so many situations. Just say, I'm not going to play their silly games. But if you're the one about to lose your job, that's tough to do.
Right. So racism in the 15th Amendment gave freed slaves the right to vote. And it was 100% Republicans that voted for slaves to be freed and give them their freedom and right to vote. And 0% of the Democrats voted for that. It seems to me that people are making racism an issue, and it is an issue.
Our elites, our political elites.
And it seems to me that people who think there's a problem are the ones who are creating the problem. If you don't see there's a problem,
Then you are the problem, kind of thing?
I think so.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know there's a more overworked term in the English language right now than racism. I don't know. I'm doubting why it still has any power, because it's just so overused and so misapplied. Over the last 20 years, my main focus has been to travel. I have a very nice partner who likes to travel too, and I've made it the central feature of my life. I've been to a lot of countries in the last 20 years. The United States is one of the least racist places in the world. As somebody stated it, we're the most intermingled, intermarried society that there is. So I take a certain, there's a certain lack of perspective to people who are yelling racism about absolutely everything. Are there differences in opportunity? Undoubtedly, those still exist. And obviously where they exist institutionally, something has to be done about it. I don't think there's nearly as much of that as people claim. There was something else in that question I wanted to address. Oh, I was going to tell you about parties. Whatever the definition of the two parties might be right now, everything's constantly doing this. A Republican today isn't a Republican 40 years ago.
Right.
And there's certainly not a Republican from the mid-19th century. So I should explain to people I have never belonged to a political party. I've never been tempted. I have lived in Pitkin County since I was 18 years old, and I came here under my own power. So I am more a product of this culture than any other.
And you came from?
Southern California. At the time, it was a very original idea. People back then, if they left California, they either went to Oregon or they went to Hawaii. Nobody'd ever heard of East. I was out here for 5 years before I saw my second Californian. So it was a pretty original thought in 1970. But I call it the binary hell. So many smart people think that if the other team believes something, they have to believe this. And all logic just flies out the window. I call it the Chinese menu approach to politics. Before you can get involved in a conversation, you have to decide whether you're going to order from column A or column B. And there's nothing about the individual dishes in the two columns that relate to each other in any way, much of the time. I can't get any coherence in terms of a philosophy, really, with either description. There are all sorts of things that are in the conservative column that I go, how does that appeal to a conservative? And vice versa. I just gave you an example with the freedom of speech thing. How is shutting down freedom of speech suddenly in the liberal column? How did that get there?
Amen. Can I read something? You're an amazing writer. I wish I could write as well as you do, but you wrote, most people think that partisan or nonpartisan is a reference to party politics, as in Democrats and Republicans and all that stuff. To me, a true partisan divide is between totalitarians and libertarians, people who want to run everything and people who mostly just want to be left alone. The first group inevitably drifts toward one-party rule and centralized control, the definition of totalitarian, by the way, while the second group tries to lay low and live their lives. We need both, but the former is more prone to excess without considerable resistance from the latter. And you can, if you continue, you're writing about the Institute. The Institute is all about really, really big institutions and organizations. Their concern with the individual, a word which never appears in their 3,352-word interview, is mostly to groom those who might someday run the really, really big institutions. That's fine, I guess, but could they perhaps stop pretending that indoctrinating people into totalitarian groupthink is nonpartisan? Amen.
Thank you. I felt pretty strongly about that when I wrote it, and I still do. The Institute is a very peculiar institution. Again, it's not the Institute that it was when I moved here. I'm sure it's been through 3 or 4 complete turnovers. We never seem to know who these people are. They have an overriding influence we don't even notice, and yet we kind of never stop and say, excuse me, who are you? And this really came to the forefront. I mean, I know they put on a lot of programs. We'll get to my work history maybe if we have 30 seconds here, because this is working class issues after all. Working class issues, is that the name of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize till today that was a continuing series. I thought it was just the name of the one that you had me watch. A lot of programs they put on, I don't know enough about the subject to know how good a job they're doing, or whether the people they're inviting are doing a good job. I assume there's a lot of high quality stuff that goes on over there. The one thing I do know about was their Upper Valley Mobility Study, whatever the heck they called it, that they put out about 2 years ago. Well, I've been involved in a lot of transportation planning going back to the mid-'80s. I may have been in the last transportation planning where you bring in community members that wasn't completely stage managed and manipulated to come out with a particular, conclusion.
Like the airport.
Well, that looks a little like that, and we'll give you a good example of that in a minute. I don't know how we're getting this a half an hour. Are you guys kidding me? I know something about transportation. And their mobility report of all the stage-managed, preordained outcomes, it was the worst I've ever seen. It's just pathetic.
And the politicians, they bite that.
Well, heck yeah. They've got this authoritative source they can go to support their positions. And you kind of go, wait a minute, that was a total, I actually invited somebody to rent the Wheeler for me and get some good audio video people and somebody who's good with presentation materials, and in the space of 2 hours, I will completely demolish, and I mean demolish, not only everything they did in that, but pretty much the whole transportation planning sphere that's been going on here for about 40 years. Actually, the entrance to Aspen is 50 years old.
You hit it on the button, it's groupthink.
Well, and people, another thing I noticed when I was a kid, we used to watch the news in my household. It wasn't quite required, but by God, we watched the news. It was either Huntley and Brinkley, or it was Cronkite, and I've forgotten who was on ABC then.
You're dating yourself.
I do it all the time. Can't help it. Somebody called me a maverick in the paper the other day, and I thought to myself, well, I liked the TV series.
I think that was my mom.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
And I said to myself, well, I liked the TV series, but I probably can't say that because I'm really going to date myself. For all I know, Maverick is on Nick at Night. I don't know if that series got replayed.
I don't have a TV.
Oh, well, I can't ask you. I don't know if anybody today knows what Maverick, everybody might remember the name James Garner, but they probably don't remember the TV show. We're really getting off track now. What were we talking about?
Well, let me bring it back. We were talking about racism, and I don't think there's really a lot of racism in Aspen, but there are a lot of inequalities. Are there some issues that you would like to specifically deal with?
Here in the Valley.
Okay, minimum wage, yes or no?
No, you can't have, there's going to be one, but that's not the solution to anything.
What about a minimum wage in the city of Aspen on companies with more than 500 employees, for example?
Well, you don't need it. There is no such thing. Nobody's working for minimum wage.
Living wage.
That's just a different name for the same thing. Throughout my life, there have been, I don't know how many studies on the effect of minimum wage, and it always comes out to, well, basically, in a good economy, nobody's working for minimum wage because nobody can get an employee that'll work for that amount unless they're starting out. So it always comes out to be the minimum wage hike should be relabeled the Teenage Unemployment Act.
Okay.
Because that's essentially who it affects.
Okay.
People trying to get their entry-level job for the very first time. Everybody else is making more than minimum wage to begin with.
You wrote something fantastic. You wrote in a letter to the editor that you said sacrifice should start at the top, and you offered your own salary, for example. Could you go into that for a minute?
Well, I'll preface that by saying I have yet to see anything that suggests to me that the local elected officials right this minute realize what trouble we're in. It's really easy to be, right now I call it the sugar water of, imaginary federal money, which is what the entire economy is running on. And yeah, we've got a super wealthy second homeowner class that has decided to come and spend the whole summer.
Right.
All these props are great, but they're props.
Yep.
And we have yet to see what we're facing nationally and locally in terms of layoffs, defaults, bankruptcies. We're way at the early stages of this, and then it goes back to the same old story. Are we going to have any snow? We don't know these things. And for everybody to be continuing on as though, well, we just need to get through the next month or next 6 weeks until the curve flattens. No, no, we're in for a longer ride than this. So literally the first thing I said when I announced my candidacy was that I am going to reduce my salary by the same percentage next year as the reduction in county, as represents the reduction in county revenues. Now, obviously that's got to be net, because I assume the county commissioners get taxes taken out based on their full salary. But out of what's left, I'm going to reduce that by the same amount that county revenues have gone down. I'm going to write it right back to the general fund. And the reason to do that is not because I'm self-sacrificing, because I'm really not, but at some point I think we're going to have to offer the same choice to county employees. Would you prefer to have an across-the-board salary reduction, or do you want to take the chance that your job is going to be one of the ones that isn't cut? Because I think looking forward, we've got a great potential for things getting a whole lot worse before they get better. And it's one of those things that I'm perfectly happy to be wrong. Great, I'll be wrong. But in the meantime, we shouldn't be cruising along here acting like this is all going to be over in 6 or 8 or 10 weeks. I don't think we're even close.
You write a lot about the shift of power from the individual to the collective.
Yeah.
Are we looking towards that too?
Well, it goes hand in hand with the growth of government. I'm not inherently anti-government. There are absolutely things that have to be done by the government, but something starts to itch every time I realize that what they're really saying is, you, the individual, don't have to take responsibility. We're going to take care of that for you.
Yep.
And it's not just bad for the individual, it's bad for government. I might as well introduce you to the concept of a Jeffreyism. You want your first Jeffreyism?
Sure.
If you ask government to do the impossible, it will fail. So it's more than a philosophy, it's a practical, down-to-earth management philosophy, in that you can't ask government to do everything. It will eventually collapse under its own weight. Federal government has reached a point where you can have something as big as the federal government, as long as it's down to a few relatively easy to define tasks, stuff that you can actually monitor and see how it's doing. And you might be able to have something as complex and multifaceted as the federal government on a very small scale, maybe even down to the county, where you can actually sort of get your hands on it and see what's going on. You can't have something as large and as complex as the federal government of the United States of America. It has outstripped human conventions for management. It's literally unmanageable in the literal sense. And it doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, it's beyond anyone's control.
So what do we do?
Well, we're not going to do anything. It's going to collapse at some point, and we have to decide how to rebuild it.
Right.
Well, you can't do anything to change the trajectory. What you need to be doing is talking about what you're going to do afterwards.
What should we do afterwards?
That's why I'm calling my campaign Back to Basics. If I'm elected county commissioner, to the best of my knowledge, Postman and Childs and Clapper are all lifers. I think they were born here. Is that correct, do you think? Anyway, I think at 50 years, I've been here 50 years, I may be one of the junior partners. But the important thing is we all remember what the county looked like when county government was mostly interested in feeding their sheriff and plowing the roads. And we may get back to something, I guess that's a shout out to Mr. DeSalvo. Don't worry, we won't let you starve. I don't know how many deputies you're going to have, but we won't let you starve. But we're going to have to get back to something almost that basic, I think. And again, boy, oh boy, if I'm wrong, is that great. I'm more than happy with that. But there's going to be at least 4 of us there. And I also don't know Francie Jacober's history. For all I know, she's also a lifer. But I think it's going to be a really good thing. There's going to be a majority of people on that board who have a very clear memory of what it was like when the county budget was just pennies compared to what it's got today. And we need to get back to essential services. I'm afraid we're going to get to the point where the single most important activity of the county is going to be food distribution. I think it can get that bad. I think things are in place, things are structured in such a way we could very well end up there. And that's what we need to be looking out for, what we need to be guarding against. And steeling ourselves to the point of, if we're all still alive and we're all still happy and we're all still in the valley, it ain't going to be that bad. We'll get through it. But we can't keep rolling along as though we're going to get through this in the next couple of months. I just don't think that's realistic in any way, shape, or form. I meant when I was on David Bach's radio program the other day, I meant to ask him whether his weather guy does long-term forecasts, because, my God, do we need a huge snow year. You know, just that one thing. A friend of mine, when I first moved here in 1970, one of the old timers at the time told me, he says, Jeffrey, there's two things that affect the economy here. It was R.C. Mason. Shout out to the old timers. I said, R.C., what are they? He says, well, the first one, snow. Okay, what's the second one? No snow. So those are the two things that affect the economy here. And to this day, I'm not convinced he didn't pretty much nail it. So
10 years ago, you got robbed at gunpoint.
no, it was knife point.
Oh, knife point.
Yeah.
Oh, knife point. Okay.
Yeah, it's a real interesting experience either
That's
way.
a Wild West experience.
I wish it were a Wild West. Apparently, it's more common. Well, actually, you know what? Most crime rates are down. You know, we're looking at this explosion on TV right now, and you tend to forget that things are a whole lot better than they were, 40 years ago. That's a hard concept for people generally. All the things that are better now than they were 40 years ago. Yeah, it's no fun. Two things won't go through your mind. Not everybody, but I'll tell you, this is very likely. Two things will go through your mind simultaneously. One, this guy is not in touch with reality. And two, I don't know how far out of touch he is. You're swimming. All reference points are gone. You got a knife at your throat and a guy saying, give me your money and your keys. And pretty much all foundation has been ripped out from under your feet. You don't know where you're at. You don't know where you are. But
So back to Aspen, as far as...
let's go to my work history for a minute. I spent 29 years building models for architects. So I know the whole development industry from the other side. People scramble around trying to make their presentation as good as possible so they can put it in front of the elected officials and have them vote for it. So I really understand that. I understand the value of presentations. I understand that first impressions are literally made in 3 to 5 seconds, and after that you're in trouble. So that gave me a really good grounding. I have a perpetual and forever appreciation for anything handmade, because I made my living with my hands for 29 years. I reached burnout point. For the last dozen years, my primary source of income has been working with CTS Aspen Limousine. Those are the guys with the big 28-seater mini coaches. And they do things like providing transportation for the Institute for a lot of the, programs that go on there, shuttling people back and forth to the hotels, that sort of thing. The job that I normally do 8 months out of the year is gone. They specialized in moving large groups, corporate groups, really big weddings. By the middle of April, their entire calendar was empty, canceled. They're trying to hold on to next year to see if by next May they can get back to normal. My secondary job, and this came about because at some point CTS Aspen decided they wanted to focus entirely on the large group thing. They weren't so interested in running their SUVs anymore. Well, the SUVs were mostly involved with chasing private jets to rifle every time it snowed, that sort of thing. So when they eliminated that, or decided to play that down to the minimum, worked great for them, wasn't so great for some of the drivers, and I was one of those. So I've had a relationship with High Mountain Taxi that goes back almost 35 years. Every so often I show up at the front door, I go, oh, it's Jeffrey, take number 3, and I go out and I make us both some money. That's about how formal it's been for 3.5 decades through 3 different owners. I show up at the door. Well, the last 3 winters, since CTS decided to eliminate a lot of their SUV work, I have worked the 4 months of winter. And I work the overnight shift. I work from 7:30 in the evening to 7:30 in the morning, 6 days a week. Well, that sounds a little grueling, and it is. But the beauty of that was it freed up time for my partner and I to travel. I work 7 months worth of hours condensed into 4 months. I've got 8 to 10 weeks out of the year. Nobody cares where I am.
Top 5 favorite countries?
I don't do favorites much.
Okay.
There's a lot of things I like, and I don't tend to compare them to one another. I love Dominica. I'm not talking Dominican Republic. I'm talking Dominica. It's just south of Guadalupe. Beautiful little island. Got hit on, head on by Maria, Category 5 storm. We skipped a year because there were no services. We came back after 2 years, and those folks had pretty much put the whole island back together again. They're just amazing people. If not for the cost of living in the Caribbean, I would consider retiring there. I just love the place. So now, no sooner did they get through that, they're back into their first big tourist winter, and we get coronavirus. Well, they should have had some decent, business
Are you a
last
sailor?
winter. Huh?
Are you a sailor? Or?
No, we're snorkelers.
So
We like to go place where the little fishies are.
we got
amongst
2 minutes.
The coral. Yeah.
One sentence on each of these.
Oh, God.
Save the Thompson Divide.
I don't think it's going to be managed as one parcel. I want to thank the Crystal Valley Environmental Protection Association for their
that's one
website,
sentence.
because it actually has a map. For the first time, I know what the Thompson Divide is.
Snowden, the
We
whistleblower.
have 5 million people, the last I heard, with top secret clearance. I don't think all 5 million of them should be deciding for themselves what should be secret and what shouldn't.
Amen.
So I don't agree with what he did.
More RAFTA tax increases.
One of the questions that I'm going to ask that I don't think will be asked by any other elected representative is it possible to have enough buses? Even this last tax increase where they went to property taxes, RAFTA couldn't seem to think of any new bus service they wanted to add. You go through the whole list, it was about doing all these construction projects at the various bus stops. They were going to expand bus service. We're out of time, aren't we?
We got 1
They
minute.
were going to increase bus service on weekends, or all real low ridership terms. It seems that even RAFTA has run out of ways to expand their service. They can't even seem to think of anything they should,
Amen. Plastic bag tax.
Well, I thought it was going to lead by now to a tax on all packaging coming out of the grocery store. It still hasn't happened, but it can, because the barcoding makes it possible. As a concept, I didn't think it could possibly be sillier. One, we had plastic bags because of a bunch of self-appointed environmentalists saying it was better than paper bags. That's how we get the plastic bags to begin with. But secondarily, the only bag that we reuse, that we bring home from the grocery store, are the plastic bags. We use them for kitty litter. Oh, we're getting signals over here. It was the closest thing to a reusable. Anyway.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. We wish you the best of luck in this county commissioner race.
Thank you very much.
Shawn?
Yes, I hope you win and you can effect some
Now,
change.
keep in mind, once you get Francie in here, you might decide you like her better.
Well,
You're going to have to talk to her first and then make up your mind.
That's no, sir. We are here because we want you elected.
All right.
Amen.
Okay. All right.
So,
well, thank
God
you.
bless,
I appreciate it.
and thanks so much.
And anybody else wants to invite me to their TV program, just let me know.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.